All right, welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I, Graham Giason Matthews, review all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. Of course, November is being devoted to watching old Survivor Series shows, all the ones that I did not cover last year. If you want to check out those reviews, they're already up here on the channel from last November, including Survivor Series 1990, 96, 97, 98, 2001, 02, 03, 05, 08, 2011, and 2012. All the rest will be reviewed here on the channel. 87, 88, 89, 91, 92, and 93 are already up here from the last couple of days. So without further ado, let's analyze Survivor Series 1994. On the whole, I thought it was a decent show. We'll break it down with the opening match. The Bad Guys, a traditional 5-on-5 elimination Survivor Series tag team match. The Bad Guys, Razor Ramon, the British Bulldog, Sion Fatu, and the 1-2-3 Kid taking on the Teamster, Shawn Michaels, Diesel, Owen Hart, Jim Neidhart, and Jeff Jarrett. A lot of star power in one match. It's crazy to look at. He had Razor Ramon, he had X-Pac, otherwise known as a 1-2-3 Kid at that time, the British Bulldog, Shawn Michaels, Diesel, Owen Hart, so many great in-ring athletes, so many great, huge stars in one match, and made for a very entertaining match. Now, most of the match was centered around the tension tease between Shawn Michaels and Diesel, and Diesel eliminated most of the babyface team, eliminated, I'm pretty sure, 4 out of the 5 guys, and Razor Ramon's team won because he was the sole survivor, but Diesel went on a total rampage, and then towards the end, Shawn Michaels accidentally super kicked Diesel, leading to the two teasing tension, and Diesel chased Michaels out of the arena, leaving Razor Ramon to win the match. Setting up their WrestleMania match for the following year, where Michaels would win the Royal Rumble, and 2 days later, Diesel would win the WWE Championship, which I'll get to when I talk about the WWE title match shortly. The match itself was good the match, like I said, a lot of these Survivor Series tag team matches in the early 90s and mid-90s and whatnot were more often than not focused around building bigger stories towards WrestleMania. This one planted the seeds right here, and this pretty much solidified the split between Michaels and Diesel, as Diesel would go on to become WWE champion only days later, literally only like 2 days later in MSG. It's still a good match and a very fun way of opening the show. So after that, we had another 4-on-4 Survivor Series elimination traditional tag team match with the Royal Family, Jerry Lawler, Sleazy, Queasy, and Cheesy taking on Clowns R Us, Doink the Clown, Dink the Clown, Pink, and Wink. So obviously a comedy match. It was okay. I wasn't really a fan of it. A lot like the comedy match from a year prior. A little bit better because this was intended comedy, whereas like Men on a Mission and Bushwhackers versus whoever it was, Bam Bam and his cast of misfits, I'm pretty sure it was in 93. That felt like a total waste of time. At least this was, it was comedy done okay. I'm not going to say comedy done right. I thought it was fine. Jerry Lawler's team, all of them survived. But afterwards, which I thought was funny, he treated them all like garbage. And he said, I was the sole survivor. I'm the winner. You guys are, just help me out. Now get out of my ring. And they all rebelled against Jerry Lawler, both them and all the remaining participants of Doink's team, Dink, Pink, and Wink. So these 3 midgets all going against Jerry Lawler and chasing him around the ring, and Doink comes back out. So it's a pretty fun little angle. So it's not a complete waste of time. The Doink and Jerry Lawler feud was meant to be dumb, but it was comedy done okay as opposed to the year before, so I didn't completely dread it. But the post-match stuff was pretty funny, though. So after that, we had a throw-in-the-towel submission match for the WWF title. Bob Backlund contending for the gold against Bret Hart. And what I thought was a pretty good match. I watched their match at WrestleMania 11 the following year, the I Quit match. Technically the first I Quit match in WWE history. A very bad match. I thought that match it wasn't a bad match, I should say. It was rather boring. It was very, very boring. And this match was too at some points, but I thought these two worked very well together. Personally, I think Bob Backlund is very underrated. Not as like a worker or anything like that, but his impact on the business. And I know, you think of the biggest stars of all time, and I'm pretty sure I've ranted about this in the past, but you think of the biggest stars of all time in WWE history. You have Bruno Sammartino, Hulk Hogan, John Cena, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock. But Bob Backlund often gets left out of the equation. I don't really know why, because he was around for more than a cup of coffee. He was WWE champion for several years in the 1980s and late 70s before passing the torch to Hulk Hogan, almost immediately dropping the title to Iron Sheik in early 80s, and then Hogan comes around and wins the belt. But Bob Backlund was back. He had a bone to pick with the WWE champion Bret Hart, saying that he had never technically lost the WWE title the first time around, and quote-unquote invoking his rematch clause on this show. He was already a full-fledged heel. He had Owen Hart in his corner, who was already still feuding with Bret Hart, and that was one thing about this match that kind of surprised me, in a good way. 1994 was the year of Bret versus Owen. Now, I know they had this really goes back to Survivor Series 1993, when the two first teased tension, and you had the Hart family versus Michaels and his Knights. So this feud was really like a year long, and then some change, as they really went the full circle here from Survivor Series to Survivor Series. They had their match at WrestleMania. I know they had that amazing steel cage match for the WWE title at SummerSlam, but I thought that was it. I thought that was the end of the feud, and I guess it continued past that going into Survivor Series with Owen Hart being in the corner of Bob Backlund. So what I really thought was clever, on the downside, which I'll address first, when Backlund had Bret Hart in the crossface chicken wing, whatever he calls it, Bret Hart was in the submission for at least 5 minutes, if not more than that. That might be gracious. That might be just being gracious and saying 5 minutes. He was in that hold for a very long time, and he wasn't going to get out, but he wasn't going to submit either. And then nowadays, if that happens, the referee usually holds up the arm. You know the whole deal. And then he just passes out, and the opposing person wins. Imagine if at Fastlane, Rusev had John Cena in the Accolade for 10 minutes, and Cena did not pass out, and the match wouldn't end until the guy was dead or Cena tapped out, and of course the referee called for the belt shortly after Cena was out, and Bret Hart was clearly out of it by the time Backlund had this thing locked in. 2 minutes, 3 minutes in, but they wouldn't let go. But I appreciated the story they told here with Owen Hart feeling, quote-unquote, feeling bad for his brother and forcing his family, Stu Hart and Helen Hart, I believe her name was, at ringside, and kind of showing sympathy for Bret. And in doing so, that convinced the family to throw in the towel. And as a result, Bob Backlund became the new WWE champion, ending Hart's reign from WrestleMania. So a very good reign for Bret Hart. Bob Backlund's second reign with the title, unfortunately, did last for a cup of coffee. Going back to what I was saying earlier, he dropped it, if not a day, 2-3 days later, right after this pay-per-view, to Diesel at a house show in MSG. So very short-lived, kind of made this whole thing irrelevant for the most part. It was kind of like the Montreal Screwjob before the Montreal Screwjob, coincidentally enough, also with Bret Hart. But the match itself, I thought, was really good up until the ending. Being in the submission for like 20 minutes was kind of tedious at one point. But the whole angle, the storytelling, the character work from Owen Hart at ringside, I thought was phenomenal. Unsurprisingly phenomenal. The guy was amazing. He was a complete package, Owen Hart was. Why he was never WWE champion, I guess it just really wasn't the right time. But the guy was great. But still, I thought it was a very good match and a great finish, too, that kind of furthered the feud between Owen and Bret, and then set up a rematch, an unnecessary rematch, mind you, that was not over a championship. It just happened to happen between Backlund and Bret Hart at WrestleMania, the first ever I Quit match in WWE history. So after that, we had another 5-on-5 traditional Elimination Survivor Series tag team match. The $1 Million team consisting of King Kong Bundy, Tatanka, Bam Bam Bigelow, Jimmy Del Rey, and Tom Pritchard, with the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, taking on Guts and Glory, Lex Luger, Mabel, Adam Bomb, and the Smoking Guns, with Oscar in their corner. It was a good match. I thought it kind of lasted a little longer than it should have. The sole survivors were King Kong Bundy and Bam Bam Bigelow. The $1 Million team, I thought Ted DiBiase was very effective in a managerial role. I thought he was great in that role because he's just a great talker. And I don't think he couldn't wrestle by that point, but they wanted to transition him out of that wrestler role for whatever reason. And I don't think he ever really wrestled a match. I looked back after watching this pay-per-view at his win-loss record from 1993 onward, and I think he wrestled his final WWE match, save the Battle Royal in 2007. In 1993, on an episode of Raw, he never wrestled once when he was a manager from 93 to 95 before he left for WCW, which I thought was interesting. But I thought his talents were very well utilized in a managerial role because the guy was a great talker. Now, that said, the people he managed, well, he had a couple good names like King Kong Bundy and Bam Bam Bigelow, both of whom should be in the WWE Hall of Fame, in my opinion. None of them were really kind of like Bobby Heenan in a way. Bobby Heenan will go down as the greatest manager of all time, right up there with Paul Heyman. But even Bobby Heenan's associates never really succeeded in what they set out to do. They never won that WWE title from Hulk Hogan in the late 80s and early 90s, whereas $1 Million Team was basically the same thing. At least Bobby Heenan had bigger names. Like I said, Bundy and Bigelow weren't no-namers. They were pretty noteworthy and pretty well-known. But still, I mean, none of them were they were all basically losers. Throughout most of 1995, they all got fed to The Undertaker. Pretty much 1995 was Undertaker versus the $1 Million Corporation, or Ted DiBiase's goons, or whatever they were calling themselves. And he beat them every single time, so it was kind of a waste. But yeah, I thought it was fine for what it was. The match itself, I thought, the Luger and Tatanka story was well further. They told that good story there, but good from an in-ring standpoint. And then we get to the main event, a casket match between The Undertaker and Yokozuna, with Chuck Norris as the special guest referee. So this was different than the coffin match that we got, I believe, the year before. My years might be messed up. I think that might have been in 92, between Taker and Kamala. Yeah, Kamala. I think it was 92. This was a casket match, not a coffin match, whereas you don't need to nail the coffin down in order to win. You just need to put your opponent in the casket, as we know nowadays, the same rules that apply to today. But a very limited match, as limited as you would expect. Kind of, once again, like the Hart brothers, their feud going from 93 Survivor Series to Survivor Series 1994. This feud was no different. Taker had taken some time off after the Royal Rumble in 94 to feud with Undertaker when he came back that SummerSlam. And then he came back to reignite his feud with Yokozuna going to Survivor Series. And the match was not good at all. Yokozuna was kind of broken down. He was gaining more and more weight by the year, from 92 when he first debuted to 95 when I believe was his final, or maybe it was 96. I forgot what year it was, but one of his final WWF Survivor Series events, one of his final appearances with the company. But yeah, a very limited match. It was not a good match at all. But Chuck Norris, it was cool to see him at ringside. I believe they were in Texas and everyone was wearing cowboy hats, which was funny. But I thought Chuck Norris's his appearance at ringside, his presence at ringside was cool. It didn't really serve much of a purpose. He didn't do much other than he super kicked Jeff Jarrett, which was pretty great. And I've always been a huge Walker Texas Ranger fan. I grew up in middle school as a Walker Texas Ranger fan. The show wasn't around during my time. It was around when this show happened in the early 90s to late 90s. But I grew up watching it on the USA Network, and I love Chuck Norris, love Walker Texas Ranger. So it was cool for me to see him involved in this match in a way. But the match itself was really no good. And that was Survivor Series 1994 in a nutshell. On the whole, I thought it was an okay show. Not a great show, not a bad show. Nothing really deplorable. The main event wasn't good, but Chuck Norris's presence was cool. The 3 Survivor Series elimination matches, I thought the best one was the opener. The $1 Million Team versus Guts and Glory one I thought was decent. And then the other one was pure comedy with Jerry Lawler and Doink the Clown and their goons. And the WWE title match I thought was, I would call it underrated. I thought it was well wrestled, had a great finish, and kind of harpering back to when Backlund first lost the belt and his manager, Arlen Skoland, threw in the towel for him to relinquish the WWE Championship in the early 80s. So I thought that was kind of good storytelling there too. So yeah, a middle-of-the-road show. I don't know, I wouldn't call it must-see on the WWE Network, but if you do have some time to kill, I believe it might be 2.5 hours, if not. I mean, most of these pay-per-views do round out to 3 hours, but some of the early 90s, late 80s ones I know for a fact are about 2.5 hours, where some of them are closer to 3, but if not 2.5, 2:45, it is, it's not a waste of your time, it's not well worth your time, but if you do have some time to kill, it is worth checking out for some of the matches, specifically Chuck Norris and the WWE title match and the opener. And that is it. That was Survivor Series 1994. Thank you for listening. Thank you for checking out the review. Always appreciate it. I'll be back. Should be going up today on Thursday. I'm recording these throughout the week, and we should be back on track because I missed so many over the course of late October, early November due to my laptop being fixed. But we should be back on track as of this upcoming week. So we'll have to wait and see. But my next review will be up on Saturday. Just one review going up, Survivor Series 1995. Be sure to check it out. But in the meantime, in a between time, you guys can catch me on Twitter at WrestleRant, on Facebook at facebook.com/GrahamDutchHM.Matthews, right here on YouTube by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. And be sure to check out my website for full reviews of Raw, SmackDown, Main Event, NXT, Ring of Honor, Impact Wrestling, and everything else in between at nextEraWrestling.net. So until Saturday, guys, have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham Matthews, and I'll catch you folks down the road.